It's a bit tight, it's cosy and friendly. Okay, welcome to today's meeting of the Accounts Commission, which is today being held in Glasgow. The public session of the meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be made available via the Accounts Commission website as soon as possible. It is available on request in the interim. Members of the public are also welcome to observe the session. Those who are watching this morning, thanks for joining. You're here to observe and not participate if your camera and microphone are already on. I also would like to put on the record thanks for the representatives of North Ayrshire being here this morning. Thanks for joining us. And for anybody participating in the meeting, joining us online, please keep your camera off and your microphone on mute, except when it's your item. And may I ask all those who are speaking during the meeting to speak clearly and loudly. Then for the recording, anybody listening. That takes us to item 1. Apologies for absence.
One Commission member, Carol Evans, who submitted apologies.
It's just item 2, which is declarations of connections. Can I ask members who have connections or interest regarding any items on today's agenda to please state their connection or interest and whether they consider it material enough to be to recuse themselves. Jennifer and then Malcolm.
It's the usual one in relation to the future of public audit model items. As a chief executive of another public body, I obviously do have an interest in the future of the public audit model, but I've taken advice via Sarah from the ethics partner who's happy I can participate.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of items 5 and 10, declare a connection as a member of the Standards Commission. I took part in a hearing into the conduct of an individual member of North Ayrshire Council recently. Having applied the objective test, I do not consider this connection amounts to an interest, so I will stay in the meeting and take part. So it's just by way of a transparency statement. And also, if I may, Chair, items 13 and 14, very similar to Jennifer as a member of an audit board.
Consent. Normal, I'd like to see the Commission's approval for the order of business today. I propose that we consider items 9, 16 in private. The reasons set out on the agenda are members agreed. Yeah. This is minutes at the last meeting.
Two matters arising on the minute. The first was in relation to the Controller of Audits update and capital projects. Helena is working with the team who prepared the audit planning guidance and supplementary guidance on best value in relation to capital projects and asset management. There was also a discussion about the use of expectations and recommendations. So in Commission reports, we sometimes see expectations, sometimes recommendations. So we'll be working with PABB to bring a paper back to the Commission in either December or January on the kind of clear rationale for why one is used and not another.
Any other questions or comments or seeking approval for the minute? So are we to approve the minute?
Yep.
Five, which is key item of today's agenda, which is the best value of North Ayrshire Council. This is a statutory report by the Controller of Audit on best value of North Ayrshire Council. The report draws attention to the findings from the Council 2024-25 annual audit report, how effectively the Council demonstrates best value. The Commission is invited to consider and endorse the Controller's report in this session. We will then consider in private later today how we wish to proceed. The Controller and the audit team are here to provide any clarifications or answers to questions that members may have on both the Controller's report and the annual audit report as it relates to best value. I hand over to Helena.
Thank you and good morning everybody, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to discuss my report on best value at North Ayrshire Council with you this morning. My thanks to the team and in particular Fiona and Dave sat alongside me for all their hard work in completing the 24-25 audit, which is the basis for my report today. As my report concludes, North Ayrshire has continued to demonstrate a strong culture of continuous improvement and has robust arrangements in place to secure best value. The Council has made good progress on previously identified improvement actions and systematically measures and reports its performance across its strategic priorities. The leadership of the Council has been effective in setting clear priorities, which are articulated in the Council Plan published in June 2023, following extensive consultation with its partners and communities. The Council exceeds its 1% participatory budgeting target with 1.85% subject to participatory budgeting in 24-25. The Council has a well-developed performance management framework, and good progress has been made on implementing actions for years 1 and 2 of the Council Plan. In September, the Council reported that of its 26 Council Plan indicators, 50% are currently on target. Of the Council's 33 LGBF priority indicators, 17 were within the top 2 quartiles. Looking at all LGBF indicators shows an improving position year on year, but overall performance relative to other councils remains broadly constant. The Council has effective financial management processes in place to manage budgets and undertook extensive engagement and consultation with communities to help shape the 25-26 budget. However, like all councils, the Council is forecasting budget gaps in the future. The latest estimates suggest a general fund cumulative budget gap for 26-27 and 27-28 of 11 million after the planned use of reserves. And while the Council is in a strong position with its reserves, it's not sustainable to use these to address budget gaps, and further recurring savings need to be made. The Council's transformation programme sets out how it intends to transform its services in line with its priorities. It's supported by a well-resourced transformation team, robust officer-led governance, and elected members receive regular updates. Between 2021-22 and 24-25, the Council achieved financial efficiencies from its change programme of 3.1 million and forecast a further 8.5 million savings to 27-28. But it's clear, therefore, that current transformation programme will not be sufficient to address the budget gaps forecast. The Council must be more ambitious, and discussions are currently ongoing on how greater efficiencies could be realised through delivering Council services differently in partnership with others. And I note a Council report on collaborative working across the Ayrshire region was considered by elected members in North Ayrshire last month. This work is at an early stage, but suggests a recognition that transformation at a local level may not be ambitious enough to tackle the financial challenges faced. I'll pause there, but there's a lot that we can get into in discussion today, so look forward to picking that up.
Our standard procedure discussing this report is to organise our lines of questioning into themes to the area of 4 themes: analysis, imagination, performance, and community engagement. So if I start with the first one.
Yeah, happy to do. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Helena, for the report. I mean, I think recognising that we're in early October, I would just support the comments you made about getting the reports to us in time. That must have been a challenge. And I think at the same time we should recognise the Council as well, because completing the audit, there's times when in regular meetings we have expressed concern about delays in audit. I think the fact we have the audit report for 24-25 in front of us today is a big issue, and that would be down to the Council as well as the audit team. I think I'd have to say this is one of the best reports we've seen, so I think, again, congratulate the Council for that. I've probably got 4 areas I wanted to focus on the finances section, and I think it's probably more clarification as much as anything. I think in the timescale, the focus on the annual audit report as opposed to your report, Helen, and I wouldn't go as far as say there were contradictions, but there's maybe 1 or 2 things that didn't maybe sit as well as they might. So I want to try and tease out to make sure I've got my own understanding correct. Is it okay, Chair, if I just go through all 4 of them? And the first one, they're not really in any particular order, around about financial reserves. I think at face value they seem quite high, but I was drawn to the annual audit report and paragraphs 80 and 81. I would like to understand a bit more. I think you have commented that the Council repeatedly using reserves to balance the budget, but the audit report seems to me to suggest there's a positive strategy and a purpose to the use of reserves. So I would like to tease that out a bit more. The second point was round about capital investment. And I thought the covering report was maybe slightly critical of the council in terms of reducing planned expenditure and the service implications of that. However, in the annual audit report, again, it suggests a detailed planning review and a financial reappraisal, which I think we would support in the context of capital plans that are affordable and sustainable. So again, I wanted to tease out what the audit perspective of the capital investment strategy is. Third point was around about the medium-term financial strategy itself. Recognising the council's reporting an underspend in 24-25, it seemed to me that that came from sort of non-service areas. So I would again just wanted to, the medium-term financial strategy, is it realistic? What are the assumptions and modelling that are going into it? And just confirmation that there is modelling rather than focusing on the absolute figures that are quoted in the report. And finally, from myself, I guess like all councils, the largest phenomenon seems to be around about integrated joint boards, which will not come as a surprise to anyone. I would like to understand the relationship between the council and the health board and what actions have been taken to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a lot within that, and I'm going to slightly reverse the order a little bit, if that's okay. And I think I'll start with just the medium-term financial strategy, and then the risks that you mentioned around IWBs, and then maybe getting into the specifics around capital and reserves as well, which is starting with that big picture. And I'll kick off and bring in the team, and we'll try and chunk it in as straightforward a way as possible. But I suppose just to kick off on the medium-term financial strategy, and perhaps just to explain some of the numbers in the report, and I'll bring Dave in to go through those in a bit more detail. I think I just clarify the size of the gap, and I'll firstly point towards Exhibit 9 in the annual audit report, which is on page 50, which I think is a really helpful exhibit. And what this does is set out the size of the funding gap, but then also the specific pressures associated with the health and social care partnership as well. Just to pull out a factor around the timing of the reports, I think, Derek, which you'd alluded to. So the figures within the annual audit report are drawn from the medium-term financial outlook, which the council prepares in October. The 11 million budget gap figure that's quoted in my Controller of Audit report is drawn from an update to the medium-term financial plan, which the council prepares as part of its development of the budget papers. So it's a slightly different figure, but I think the headline for me would be not to get too drawn into what is actually a fairly marginal difference. I think the bit that is really interesting and important to draw out here, as we have done already, is the health and social care pressures, which are pulled out in the medium-term financial outlook. But Dave, I don't know if there's anything more that you want to come in and just talk about the medium-term financial outlook, and then also perhaps some of the assumptions that are used as part of that, and Derek's question around those.
Thanks, Helena. The medium-term financial outlook, which we quote in the annual audit report, as Helena said, appeared in October, and is really the precursor to the start of the budget negotiations for the following February. The MTFO draws on similar data and projections in the Council's long-term financial outlook, which is a 10-year plan. The current 10-year plan was submitted back in 2023, it's due for an update in 2026. But really draws on the LTFO and provides more recent cost analysis, funding metrics, and short and medium-term impacts from key global, UK, national events, inflation, public sector pay, interest rates, along with Scottish Government priorities, such as growing economy, tackling climate change, and so on. The medium-term financial plan builds on the medium-term financial outlook, and of course, by this time, the council have a clearer picture of whether the budget gap has changed and how that can be worked in effect. And in the plan, which was submitted to the council in February, it provides a range of savings proposals to deliver a balanced budget, and also provides an indicative budget for the following 2 years. That's really just a summary of why there's a difference between the outlook and the plan. As Helena said, the outlook also includes HSCP projections, which are quite substantial over the 3-year period. As I said, it brings the outlook brings in a whole lot of factors. The plan then builds on that and comes up basically with a range of savings proposals to produce a balanced budget. The plan also previously agreed use of reserves. These are built into the outlook and the plan. Based on projections, there may be a further draw on reserves at the stage.
So if we just come on to the assumptions specifically within the medium-term financial outlook, and you asked particularly around the health and social care partnership, and I think obviously the assumption that's set out here is that the health and social care partnership would manage its own budget pressures. And obviously those are, as you can see from Exhibit 9 in the table, quite substantial. I think, and again, the team might want to come in to say a bit more, relationships with the IJB are productive, and there is a finance working group, which includes the council's head of finance, and that meets monthly to facilitate the increased oversight and scrutiny of the finance and transformation programme within the IJB. But I think there is a recognition, I think it's really important to see it built into that sort of projections and that medium-term financial planning of the challenges that the health and social care partnership is facing, and the risk that then places on the council's own financial strategy. We move on, conscious, onto reserves, first of all. Again, Derek, as you highlighted, the council is in a good position with its reserves. It has an earmarked balance of 2% of expenditure budget, which management consider is suitable contingency and is in line with many other councils. And then it also holds 85.1 million earmarked reserves. 38 million of these relate to the loans fund, and then the remainder are earmarked for specific purposes, such as supporting the council's recovery and renewable strategy and the medium-term financial planning. And I think, as we've already alluded to, the council have approved the use of reserves to balance its budget in 24-25 and 23-24, as well as in 25-26. But I think, as we've discussed before, the use of reserves to balance a budget is not a sustainable approach, and the council recognises that balancing budgets will require a range of approaches, such as service redesign or income generation council tax as well. But I think it has been part of its approach in the past. Again, I don't know if the team wants to say any more about the reserves before we move on to capital.
If I could maybe just touch on the IJB. At 31st of March 25, the IJB has just over 3 million of earmarked reserves and no uncommitted reserves. And lack of any uncommitted reserves obviously presents a significant financial risk to both the IJB and its partners. It's probably worth highlighting that financial sustainability of the HSCP is one of 5 very high risks the council has in its strategic risk register. For 25-26, sorry if I'm going off. For 25-26, the IJB budget includes proposed savings of just over 4 million. In addition, the IGB's own medium-term financial outlook has identified required savings of between 8.1 and 21.4 million in 26-27 as best case to worst case scenarios. Our 24-25 annual audit report for the IGB reported that it needs to support more radical reform and cost reductions if it is to demonstrate financial sustainability. And I think that's why we were keen to include in the Council's annual audit report just a reflection on the HSCP position and the potential impact on the Council.
I think I'd probably just like to add to what Helena and Dave have said and just draw your attention to the fact that we do conclude that financial management is effective, and conversations we're having here demonstrate that the Council has a strong understanding of the risks and the challenges for the future and has prepared itself well as it could have done and doing so, and is taking decisions in an informed way, recognising the decisions, which is something really important for us and reassuring.
Which probably leads then quickly onto capital, and I suppose just to hopefully reassure Derek that that sort of difference that you may have picked up wasn't deliberate. So maybe reading between the lines a bit too much within that. I think what we do recognise is that the Council has rephased around 19% of its planned expenditure in 24, 25 and 26. 25-26 for delivery. And as we've discussed before, challenges in delivering a capital programme is a common theme of the discussions that we've had. North Ayrshire are not unique in having faced issues in relation to cost pressures and supply chain challenges. The capital programme is a part of a rolling programme of capital work. And I think the rephasing has been part of a planned consideration of delivery. And as such, there isn't, I understand, an impact on outcomes as it's part of a planned programme of property refurbishment, vehicle replacement, but it obviously does have an impact on the pace of improvements. But again, I don't know if the team want to.
I suppose it's just the same point I made earlier, that it's all done in a planned and informed way, and the Council recognises the pressures in the construction market and the increasing financial pressures in turn needed to refocus and reprioritise the stormwater.
No, that's helpful. I mean, I think the only comment I think is maybe the link between capital and revenue. I was quite interested to read in your annual audit report the Council had put the service concession gain into a revenue reserve. I think it's something I know we've looked at. Commission what other councils will be there. I know some councils have just used the money to plug budget gaps. Again, I thought that was very positive in terms of how the council had used the funding. That's helpful. Thank you.
I think that's a really useful explanation. So where I've got to in trying to get a sense of where they're likely to be in 27-28 is that it's 11 million plus the pressure. But I wasn't clear whether the savings that have been identified of 8.5 million are already taken account of in the 11 million. And secondly, just to check what will be the reliance on saving on reserves by 27-28. I mean, in other words, what's the structural gap being filled by reserves? Because it feels as if the challenge for transformation is somewhere between sort of 3 and 5% of the budget over the next 3 or 4 years. But that's really what I was trying to get at.
Yeah. So yeah. I think we've got the figures for 25-26, obviously exhibit 2 in the Controller of Audit report, setting out the budget gap, and then how much was planned to be met by savings, and shows the historical plans for meeting savings. And and the use of reserves. And I think we also flag in the report in paragraph, 51, the overall outlook for the council and the forecast, which includes a use of reserves of 1.8 million in 27-28 and 3.5 million in 2026-27. As to the detail as to whether within those planning assumptions, the 8.5 million from the transformation programme have been captured, I'm not sure.
It is included.
It is included.
In
So this is the additional.
in the projections. Yeah.
Share the positive comments about both the report and the performance.
Just a quick question, if I may, on the HSCP, which Derek has already touched on, and you've perhaps said all you can on that, but it's clear that this does present a significant financial risk to the council, and not alone in that. Can we hear a bit more, or can you say any more about the proposed savings and the recovery actions that are talked about in the AAR, and what is the team's assessment of the likelihood of those being achieved?
So the IJB, the HSCP's savings.
Yes.
I'm not sure if we have the detail of that in front.
I can add,
Yeah.
I can just add some detail to it. I think I mentioned earlier the 25-26 IGB budget had planned savings of just over 4 million. Of those 4 million, 3 million are rated amber and 1 million green. Amber rated savings include 1 million for improved outcomes for very, very young people, and another 0.5 million related to continued review of the care at home service. We reported in our IGB annual audit report that there is considerable uncertainty around these savings, mainly because at month 3, both of these areas are projected to overspend significantly, and both areas were significantly overspent in 24-25. So it's not a picture of the savings actually being achieved, which we reported on.
All right.
Thank you. I think we've given finances a bit on to move now on to transformation.
Thank you. For the report, Helena, I think start by reflecting actually an encouraging picture around how the council is doing transformation. I think it was heartening to see there's a plan, they're delivering on the plan, there's good governance, and I think there's a lot I'm sure that other councils could learn from that. I suppose my reflection then was, given how well the council has set itself up to deliver transformation, it's obviously quite worrying that they don't think that the scale of what they're doing is going to be enough to fill the gap, the budget gap. And I suppose I'm interested to explore, do we think the council is doing enough to be really ambitious in what it can do, given it's set up to do things well in that regard? Or is it really at the limit of what it can do? I noticed in the report it obviously talks about the fact that there's an opportunity to explore working more collaboratively with other partners in the other Ayrshire councils. I'm just interested to tease out whether we've got a kind of sense of, I've noticed there's actions in the transformation BV thematic about being more ambitious. I'm just interested to tease that out a little bit more. Or is this the limit of what the council can do for itself?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll pull out a couple of things and then bring the team in to expand on this a little bit more as well. I suppose the first thing I'd say, and we have quite a lot of debate and discussion around this, I think, is around transformation as well as savings. So what I would highlight is, as a component in Exhibit 2 within my report, the council has been making savings. And I think, as we've already talked about, in recognition of the it's part of its medium-term financial outlook, is continuing to think about how it is making those savings through things like reducing its workforce, etc. I think then we come on to the transformation element, and as you've already alluded to, the council has a well-structured, well-governed transformation programme. But I think, as the Best Value thematic has noted, much of that programme has been internally focused. And I think the council are aware of the need to think about that ambition and being more outward looking. But whilst the scale of savings that the transformation programme may have made aren't huge, I think they are important to recognise nonetheless. So 3.136 million between 2021, 22 and 24, 25, and then a further 8.5 million over the next 3 years. And I also think it's important to remember that transformation isn't always just about the savings, it's also about doing things differently, trying new things. And I'd highlight that the solar PV farms project is the first of its kind to be owned and operated by a local authority in Scotland. Whilst the financial savings from that may be limited, it will help the council meet its net zero targets as well. So I think it is important to remember that it's not always just about the financial savings, but also about the outcomes that we're looking to achieve through those. Then I think I would point, as you have already, to the work that the council are exploring with the other airsheds. Which does feel ambitious. I think it does demonstrate a willingness to think bigger about what is required in the current context. As the BV thematic acknowledges, though, this work is at an important stage, but I think it is an important step forward to note that elected members have indicated that they're content for this work to proceed as well. But Fiona and Dave, I don't know if there's anything.
I think just to reiterate that the Sustainable Change Programme is only part of the story, and that the council is very self-aware and constantly challenging itself. And so, for instance, it's reviewing local benchmarking framework indicators, it's identifying improvement actions there, all of the partnership working, these innovative projects. So I think it's important that we look at it as a whole in talking about transformation, and it's not just the Sustainable Change Programme. You know, the council's not sitting back and saying, "Oh no, we can't do more." They're looking for opportunities to
My follow-up question then is, given North Ayrshire has such a good way of running its transformation, that would give me hope that when they do partner up with the other Ayrshires, if that methodology can be applied across everything. So it's not really a North Ayrshire question, but I suppose when we look at the other Ayrshires, we'll be interested to see how well do they run their transformation programmes, and if everybody joins forces, are we going to get a sort of sum greater than the whole greater than the sum of the parts, or actually different councils at different levels in terms of their effectiveness of delivering transformation, which would make me worry that if you're trying to deliver something much bigger and much more ambitious, that might be problematic. But that's clearly North Ayrshire brings something to the table that could add a lot of value there. So no, thank you. I think there are a couple of other points that other colleagues uphold, but I'm happy that that's giving me what I'm looking for in terms of the ambition around taking things forward.
I mean, very much share the comments about the sort of the solidity of the overall approach that's coming through. It's striking that the opportunities for transformation look to be across the three authorities, and the big risk is in relation to the AIJB, where the partner is at the three. Covers the health board covers the three areas. So I'd be quite interested to know something about, it's at early stages collaboration, how what is the thinking about what is a realistic timescale for progress, and how far the health board is involved in all.
I think what the discussion so far has demonstrated is just the complexity, I think, of the challenge that the council and councils will be exploring, I think, as they develop their thinking around this. I think, as I've said, it is at an early stage. The three ayrshires have different structures, they have different political makeups. All of this will have to be worked through, I think. So I'm not sure I've got much to add at this point, but just that I think when we're talking about that level of ambition, as the Commission was interested in, I think it does articulate that ambition around not just looking at local solutions, but also thinking bigger and wider. I understand the senior officers of the other two ayrshires are also similarly supportive of the discussions and are progressing discussions with their elected members on how services will be delivered in the future. But I think, as we talked about, all of this just articulates the complexity that needs to be worked through to take this forward.
There are some more short-term measures that are being discussed in the meantime on whether an economic development service could be shared, and discussions around there's a roads alliance with East Ayrshire and South Ayrshire, and there's a best value review of that, and part of that is consultation of North Ayrshire can join. So whilst that's a longer term wider aspiration for all three ayrshires, I mean, we're also and with the auditor of all three ayrshires, and it is a shared aspiration by all the senior officers. But in the short term, they're looking at what they can do. So yes, we're also the auditors of the Health Board, and the Health Board is in a difficult position financially, but relationships between all the organisations are positive, but that's really all I can say. Is the Health Board's struggling, which makes its ability to be able to do we want need? Yeah. I mean, the partnerships work effectively, but the Health Board, like all health boards across Scotland, is struggling with its position. Ayrshire in particularly.
That's the financial problem. It actually should be a driver for engagement in more ambitious cooperation.
It takes us into public service reform territory, which
I just wanted to say, I thought the work around the solar PV farms in particular, in terms of liaison with the English councils and I think Welsh councils as well, potentially was just a really innovative, impressive way of progressing something that wasn't happening elsewhere in Scotland. So I was just hoping that some of that energy of getting across silos and different ways of working and different ways of financing projects can actually be transferred with a bit of pace to the way that the ayrshires could work together, particularly as there is a sort of identification that service sort of sustainability is potentially at risk, without having something quite significant changing in terms of how they're delivered. So it was really just to say, is there a sense that there's a willingness, obviously, for the ayrshires to work together, but is there enough in terms of that impetus to try and get beyond some of the political challenges, financial challenges, silos around technical work?
I think yes, would be the impression, but Fiona, I don't know.
Yes, there's absolutely willingness, and to say that they're not stopping progress in the meantime while trying to progress more radical reform. But there's a realism about where we are in terms of political cycle, and this is not an easy thing to do, but that doesn't stop the aspiration. Progress, North Ayrshire has committed some funds to go on with that development to drive it through, so it's not just sat back passive. They're looking at how to overcome some of those challenges, investing in that, recognising that that is the real option.
Andy and then Angela.
Thanks, Chair. and thanks for the report, team. Makes good reading. Could I look at the best value report with you, paragraph 5 and 6? I'm noting here that there's a very well-established and well-resourced transformation team, which I think is to be celebrated. It's not something we've seen in every smaller council across Scotland. I'm wondering, have you got any visibility as to the makeup of that team? Is it upskilling local staff, or are they drafted in from elsewhere and going to disappear? I'm just thinking about the continuity of skill, because the transformation skills will be required for a long time. That's my first question. The second question that's related to that is paragraph 5. And I notice again with happiness that it says there's robust officer-led governance arrangements in place to monitor the Sustainable Change Programme. I'm just reflective that quite often transformation proposals fall at one of the first hurdles when community concerns are raised around some of the proposals. Could you give us some kind of insight into member involvement, not officer, but member involvement in the governance of these transformation proposals? Because it's quite often the councillors that are pressurised by members of the public, and then the transformation programme finds it difficult to be implemented. So question around the establishment of the team, and the other one around is there member involvement in the governance of the transformation programme. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And I'll bring in Fiona to talk a bit more about the programme management and engagement with elected members. Thanks.
So I don't know the detail about who makes up the team, but we do comment that it's a well-resourced team with 11 members of staff. And in our best value report on transformation, we talk about the training they've had in terms of project management and business analysis. So a well-trained and supported team. Internal Audit have carried out a review of the transformation and change management and found good governance and management of the project. So in terms of good governance, that will ensure continuity of the programme. And I suppose that the scale of the team provides some assurance about movement within the team. Executive leadership are all members of the transformation board, so there's strong senior officer leadership, and they're all well cited on the projects. And there's also detail about officers engage with elected members as part of the transformation projects and provide updates on the programme. So while we haven't commented specifically on the makeup of the team, it's clear that there's good governance, there's good capacity there, and visibility at a senior leadership team and with elected members.
It is an in-house team. They're not sourced externally, it's an in-house team.
Can I push on our members involved in the governance of the transformation proposals?
Yeah, so just to come back in on that, on page 16 of the detailed thematic work, I highlight that officers engage with elected members from September to work towards agreeing the budget for the next year, which includes a detailed session on the transformation programme, which was held with the administration last year as part of elected member development process. And then elected members are engaged in specific transformation projects. For example, there was a report to Cabinet on early learning and childcare. And then there was in January a report to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, which was an assessment against the Accounts Commission's 2024 Transformation in Council's report. So I think there are some good examples within the thematic on engagement with elected members.
Thank you for that.
Just one question, and it's really wider than North Ayrshire, to be honest. In relation to public service reform and the good practice and good performance that we're seeing in this, I just wondered if there had been any discussion with South Ayrshire when they were considering their recent vacancy.
The details of that.
So the discussions around joint working across the Ayrshires have considered at senior officer level different models and different senior officer teams across the Ayrshire have been part of those discussions. But where the discussions are now are the short-term projects that they can realistically progress, and some investment to consider those further, more ambitious changes for the future, and that is part of those discussions. But the councils were not in a position at this point to be able to say, oh, South Ayrshire's not going to have a chief executive, because obviously there's the political aspect to it. It needs Scottish Government support and elected members support. So it's a longer term ambition, but certainly part of the discussions.
Performance. Christine, I think we're moving on to performance.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jill. Delighted to see this report. It's really nice and positive given the circumstances that many local authorities find themselves in just now. Performance, particularly interested on a more general level on the aspects of performance that weren't going so well, that were less positive, given what I've just said about everything being positive. But actually, it was paragraph 22. There was no available data, or it was unknown about two of those performance indicators. Just was interested what those two would be, if we know.
We have that information to hand. I don't think we have it.
Because I mean, it might not be that important, but it might actually be really important.
I think it is. So I don't think we have that information to hand at this point. But I think what the overall picture, I hope, is that there is a good approach to performance management and reporting, and that there is a regular programme of activity of reporting using both internal indicators but also the local government benchmarking framework as well. So I think that gives hopefully a picture of assurance about the breadth of reporting, but I'm afraid I don't think we have the detail of those two at this point.
I'm sure other members have questions on performance, Jill. So.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to ask if you could say a bit more about how the council was addressing issues around sharing information about performance reporting. It's obviously capturing that well, and it had some good early work around displaying performance information on the website, and then that seems to have fallen away a little bit with a struggle of keeping it updated. I know some of that was to do with capacity, but is there a clear enough focus on making sure that the wider public is aware of performance and how that's shared and how it's accessed as well to things like the website? Is it easy to see and understand how North Ayrshire is performing?
Thank you. So I'd say a couple of things to bring the team in as well. So obviously this was something that auditors highlighted in the 22-23 leadership thematic, where auditors noted that the council had dedicated public performance reporting web pages, but that these weren't always up to date, had a commitment to have a performance dashboard, which was offline at that point, because there were challenges with maintaining it. In the 24-25 annual audit report, we do give an update on that. Paragraph 55 highlights that the refresh of the performance dashboard was completed in August of this year. I think there are a few small steps still to be got through in terms of improving accessibility around that, but it is expected to be published in March next year. The newly designed website was also launched in July of last year and includes links to the council plan, updates on progress, scrutiny inspection reports, and the action that the council are addressing are taking to address recommendations within them. So auditors have concluded that the council is meeting the requirements in terms of public performance report. That provides the reassurance you're looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I had a specific question around about paragraphs 26 and 27 of the report, just trying to understand. References made to education in terms of sort of national rankings, that the council appeared, a high cost per pupil and low attainment, and I sort of do recognise this a challenging area. But I wonder how that sat with the following paragraph, which makes reference to the sort of positive view of the Chief Inspector Education. And I guess also I would have to confess I'm not always a great fan of these indicators that are cost-based, but it did prompt a question in my mind. Does or how does performance monitoring link to financial planning, if it does?
Thank you. So again, bringing the team, but I'd say a couple of quick words by way of introduction on education. I think a few things that is worth highlighting within this. One, I think, would be some of the specific challenges that North Ayrshire faces in terms of deprivation, and you'll have seen we included the SMID indicator at the outset of this launch. It's something that I'll be keen to do going forward, but I think it is an important piece of context for the council. I think I'd also highlight in terms of the higher cost per pupil that obviously the government policy of maintaining teacher numbers will be a factor within that, as there is a declining pupil roll in North Ayrshire, which has one of the lowest pupil to teacher ratios in the country. I can't speak for the Chief Inspector, but I think what the positive report from HMIE highlights is how the council supports schools to improve the quality of education. So whilst the indicators that we've talked about are obviously around specifics and entertainment and cost per pupil, I think, again, without wanting to speak for the Chief Inspector, I think it's a reflection of the support that the council provides schools in supporting quality improvements in education, rather than looking at some of the specific indicators that we've just highlighted. Fiona and Dave, I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about that relationship between performance management and financial planning.
You had flagged, Hannah, that pupil teachers have last week commented in the previous year's annual audit report about the pupil teacher ratio, and I think in North Ayrshire it was 12.3 against a national figure of 13.2. The council had it as a risk in the previous financial plan, but following discussions with Scottish Government around teacher numbers, there has been some movement in 25-26 on maintaining teacher numbers, and the plan is to reduce the number. That's one of the planned savings. Learning resource review, I think it's called, in the transformation plan.
If to say that in our leadership report, we reported positively on the link between the strategic objectives and the alignment with financial plans. So for instance, I mentioned earlier that review of local government benchmarking framework indicators triggers improvement activity, which then gets built into service plan delivery or the sustainable change programme, and the budget finances that. So there is an alignment.
No, that's helpful. I mean, I'm conscious here it's not the role of the Commission to comment on government policy, but I'm going to tread carefully. But this is the second council report that the Commission has considered where it's been highlighted that they've been unable to make savings because of government policy regarding teacher numbers. And I guess I note that in terms of recognising the challenges that councils are facing, and we have spoken about the financial challenges. So, I mean, I think all we can do is note the position, but note with interest the challenges councils are facing in that regard.
Yeah, questions on community engagement. Nicola, are you going to work on this one? Yes, thank you. And thank you, Helena and Fiona and the team for really investing in people. And within that, I think the keys engagement is a strong feature, evidenced by a range of factors, including the above expectation performance and participatory budgeting, engagement with young people and an independent influence spend that are particularly by the renewed commitment to consultation with the public around the budget. Is a hot potato and not easy to do with communities. So I guess my first question is really around that. What felt like a really considered and embedded approach to engagement around the budget in particular for this year, and wondered if there's a wee bit more to say on that, or if you feel that there are learning points for other authorities in that regard.
Thanks. And again, this is something that we've discussed in the past, the challenges of engagement on the budget. And I think what you've highlighted is that there's a good story to show here, and that's not always been the case. We've seen councils trying to engage communities on the budget and struggling to get responses and levels of uptake within that. So I think your question around lessons learned is absolutely something I would hope that the sector might look on and want to consider and take forward. And you know, explore would be the nature of the questions asked. I was struck that those consultations it was 6 quite focused discussion points. The consultation was managed in a way that people could choose which bits they wanted to engage in as well. So I think there's lots within that. And as you've said, the overall level of responses of just over 4,000 is really encouraging. I suppose the other thing I'd add though is I think it's important to note, as you have done, that the budget consultation engagement comes on top of a track record of good community engagement. And again, my report highlights the conclusions that were drawn out in the BDAR previously on this as well. And I do think that's an important factor. The relationships, the trust is there, and I think that's critical. So just in terms of learning the lessons, I think it's also about thinking about the foundations on which the budget engagement is built upon, and I think clearly in North Ayrshire that was there already.
Another question, and then I think colleagues might have others around. So that's the really positive story. How is that reported, or what has been reported to elected members as a result of that investment and the achievements around prioritising community engagement?
So I'll bring the team in, they might have a little bit more to add on that, but I think it's obviously an area where, in terms of the budget consultation, elected members have visibility as part of their discussions around the budget on the feedback and the responses to that consultation as well. In terms of advice on the impact of investing in community, I'm not sure that that's something that we've got sight of.
We are aware again that one of the risks that the council has in its strategic register is community capacity building and empowerment. And there's a lot of detail around what the council does to actually mitigate that risk. I don't have the detail, but certainly something that is flagged as a very high risk for the council.
And I think in particular areas as well, there'll be updates to elected members. So for instance, I know that in March 2022, full council received an update on progress on locality plans, which was obviously a previous recommendation from a BDAR as well. So I think there is advice and updates to elected members on that. But whether there's been a piece of advice that looks at the impact and the value of having had that solid investment. Sure, that's not to say that it's not existed, but it's just
It might be there somewhere. It certainly feels as though that various movies you down an impact, which is something to be celebrated. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I absolutely endorse what Nicola said about the learning from the budget consultation process. I think that's excellent. But I would contrast that with there's a comment in the best value audit which talks about scope for improvement in public reporting, and that's related. I could have asked this under transformation, Chair, but, and I totally accept there's a difference between public consultation and public reporting. They're not the same things, but that seems just a little inconsistent to me. So I just wondered if you could say a bit more on where you feel they could improve on public reporting.
Yeah, so again, bring the team in who might want to say a bit more about that specific recommendation, but I think I would flag it doesn't feel inconsistent, I think, to the points that we've already highlighted, particularly as you look at, as Nicola has done, at the achievements around participatory budgeting, to overachieve the 1%. I mean, we often talk about not councils struggling to achieve that 1%, so to have overachieved, I think, is something that we've not heard of very much. And also the long-standing policy in place for community asset transfers. The council plan was developed on the basis of extensive consultation and engagement. So whilst auditors have highlighted that the council could do more to report publicly on its transformation work, I don't think this is an indicator of a wide concern around community engagement. I'd also flag that the council have indicated their commitment to take forward that audit recommendation, and they have a good track record in progressing audit recommendations quickly. So again, I don't have any concerns in that regard. I think it's just a way of sort of encouraging the council to more openly share what it's doing in its transformation programme, but I don't think we have concerns in that regard.
Very helpful, thank you.
Andrew.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Helena and colleagues, for the set of reports. And I have to say, like other colleagues have already commented, overall, I think this is an unusually positive set of reports, and everyone at the council, I think elected members and officers, should be congratulated on getting the council to the position where they've got a positive performance to date. And when you look at the detail and some of these sections on particularly pace of and continuous improvement and the best value follow-up actions, and contrast it to maybe the last dozen or so councils we've read, I mean, it's remarkably positive and compares well to, say, Dundee back in, I think, November 23. So they're in a good place, but there's a but. There's always a but. And when you look at, somebody's referenced this already, when you look at the last annual audit report, paragraph 5 makes it clear, and you mentioned this, that officers, I assume elected members, are self-aware of this. They're still in a position where everything they're doing is not going to close their budget gap. So I just wondered if there was anything further to be said about the role that community asset transfers could potentially play in this, because when you look at the detail in the reports, for a council the size of North Ayrshire, there's a lot of community asset transfers ongoing. There are 10 done, but with about a couple of dozen in the pipeline. And that is a lot compared to other local authorities of comparable size. I couldn't see, I might have missed it, but is there any quantification of what that is potentially saving? Now, I anticipate that there's a short-term cost as opposed to saving, but I just wondered if there was any potential for identifying or quantifying potential savings over the medium to longer term with that quantum of community asset transfers, because they are a significant number, but I couldn't see any detail about what that might constitute in total. Hope that makes sense.
Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're aware of that quantification. That's not to say that that quantification hasn't happened.
Sure.
That we are flagged on. I think the one thing that I would flag, though, is that financial savings isn't necessarily the motivation behind community asset transfers. We need to remember that its primary purpose is around community capacity building and empowerment. Yes, there might well be financial savings and or costs in the short to long run, but that's not necessarily the primary purpose through which you'd be exploring that. But I don't think we have that quantification. As I say, that's not to say that it's not something the council have done and provided for, but it's just not been on our radar.
That's fine. It might be interesting just to in due course to have a look at that, because it might be something worth disseminating amongst others or highlighting. I mean, it is an unusually high level of trash loss, and I think potentially could be quite significant financially. Thanks very much. Thanks, Joe.
Conscious we have given this a really good view. I'm conscious, as reminded by the beginning before we joined us, that this is a good report when we barely see. So it's worthwhile reflecting on that without the evidence. There are clearly issues and concerns we have in other areas, but when we draft when we think about what we're going to do next, we're reflecting on. If there's nothing else, I think we will call this section to a close, and we're still in the public sector, so I'll ask you to hang around for a bit, and then we'll meet instead. Next items is policy updates. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all. If that's okay, keep things simple. Key things, I guess, to update on are that the Scottish budget date has been slightly revised to the 13th of January. That's a Tuesday. Basically, at the request of the Finance Committee, but still obviously a lot later than it would ordinarily be or has been in recent years, which is going to have implications for the council budget setting process and timescales. So that's something we'll obviously continue to monitor, and in terms of our internal and external reporting regarding that, the teams will obviously be considering the implications of that. A couple of other things just to update in terms of things that have developed since the report was produced. Members might have seen news even today that there's been an announcement by teacher unions who are now holding a ballot on strike action. Just to set the context for that, there's still not yet an agreement on teacher pay for this year. And of course, there's a continuing discussion around reducing contact time, which there hasn't been any updates since the last report on that. But Scottish Government and COSLA are both saying that they are actively working to develop that. So it's something I'll monitor, and again, we'll report in subsequent reports if there are any developments. And one other thing which I've picked up on this week, which is that there is a community wealth building bill going through the Scottish Parliament, which the relevant committee has produced its stage 1 report on and agreed to the support of the general principles. Something I'm going to have a look into to see if there's anything of interest to the Commission there. It's something that I picked up that other members might be interested in. I'm happy to answer any questions on anything that's in the report or anything else, as usual.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report, Joe. It's always very thorough. I'm going to ask a question which I don't expect you to be able to answer. It's maybe more aimed at the Audit Scotland team. It's round paragraph 7 and the reference to Falkirk Council now seeing the first completion of a PF. I was slightly confused by the narrative and the sort of savings that the council are quoting, given that I think most, if not all, councils took advantage of the service concession. I did not expect savings like that to materialise unless the deal was so close to ending that they didn't include that in it. So my question really is, are Audit Scotland planning to do any work around this, if not immediately, but over the near future as some of these deals come to an end, to see what the implications are going forward? Because I'm conscious there will be additional costs. I mean, the council are focusing on what they might save, but there will be costs as some of these schools now come back into council ownership and responsibility in terms of a whole range of services that will now have to provide, as well as the ongoing maintenance of these buildings. So it's maybe just a question to put a marker down. I think it's something I know we've looked at it in the past. It'd be useful to look at it again as some of these contracts are now coming to a conclusion.
Thanks, Eric. I don't think there's anything in specific on that subject matter, if I can put it that way. But of course, it's something that is going to be a fundamental part of annual audits of councils year by year. And of course, as you say, there will be things that they will save money on by not having to pay fees and borrowing costs. And in other ways, there will be costs that now they incur because they've taken on the management and ownership of schools and kind of auxiliary services. So it's something that, of course, will be looked at closely as part of annual audits. But of course, there's been a lot of media coverage recently also around the costs of PFI/PPD contracts. So I guess from that perspective, it's something that is interesting to now reflect on the fact that we're kind of moving into a phase where those contracts are the ones, certainly the first ones, are starting to come to an end now.
Thank you. Joe, thanks as ever for the update. It's always really interesting to see what's happening. On the Pride in Place fund that's been announced, I just wonder if have we done much in the way of really understanding how those allocations were made this time round, what the criteria were for the 12 places, given that some of them don't seem to be the areas of highest deprivation or areas where, from our reports, we've seen that there's a need in terms of regeneration.
It's not something I've looked into, but I think it's something that is something I want to look more widely at in terms of these different funding programmes that are provided to the UK government and also Scottish government. As the differences in how those are used. And I think similar to that, I was watching a committee session recently of chief executives as part of the local government committee's pre-budget scrutiny, and there was consideration there of the Invest to Save fund. And again, there was discussion there around the kind of pros and cons of that and the way that that was managed. It was kind of welcomed in principle, but it was nevertheless pots of money that were being provided for very specific things, which is kind of plays into that wider issue of ring fencing as well, and providing money in small pots and bidding in for that. So I think there's a broader issue there of this fund and other funds like it as to how they are administered and how effective they are and kind of the pros and cons of them. And of course, we had comment from Manager Council saying that they believe that they should have been considered for funding under this particular scheme and didn't get that funding.
Just to add, I mean, COSLA was involved in discussions on the levelling up funding and previous funding, so we can find out from COSLA colleagues if there's been involvement in the distribution methodology, for want of a better term, on that.
No more questions for Joe. We'll move on. Joe, please update. That takes us to Chair's update, which is mine. I have just a couple of things I wanted to pick up on, which is very positive, especially the cabinet yesterday. Good alignment with what he's hoping we're going to be looking at and what we've come up with in our work programme refresh of late. So that's good. Clearly values our work, particularly understands the issues around IGB financial risks, and is encouraging us to look further into that area if we can. And should definitely hope to see what our work programme looks like when we produce it in November. So we've got a willing listener and an engaging Cabinet Secretary looking for us to help hold the sector to account, but more importantly, actually to help identify where good practices and flagging up areas where we think good practices might have relevance across the sector. I'm meeting with the Cabinet Secretary to Griffin next week, which is again around how can Kent's Commission support the public service reform agenda, probably also to make sure we're not impediment to that. If we've got cross sector or cross silo collaboration, what does our role look like, and how can we make sure we don't prevent that from happening if that's the appropriate outcome for discussions? I'm thinking clearly around kind of single island authority type model. Excuse me. And there was clearly quite a lot of press around the Glasgow City Council meeting you and Ruth went to last week. Is there anything you'd like to share with the Commission on the public sector?
No, thanks, Joe. Just to say that thanks to Ruth and Sarah for the support with the visit. I mean, despite the sensitivity of the subject, Joe, it mattered. It was a very positive visit, and we were given lots of reassurance, not just about the report that's going to the Glasgow City Council at the end of this month, but as a follow-up to the Section 102 report. but they also shared with us copies of all, which are publicly available, all the reports that went, I think, before the various committees back in May, which really underscored the fact that they've made significant changes to committees in terms of reference, scheme of delegated functions, and review of arrangements for chief officer departures, all of which sort of preempted the letter that I sent about the Commissioner to all local authority chief executives and leaders. And as I say, they've got a report going to full council in a couple of weeks, just to sort of close off all those actions on the back of the 102 report. But I thought a really positive meeting, but very constructive. The council were very receptive to the findings that they made.
That covers it. It was a really good meeting. It was a challenging subject matter, obviously, but everyone that kind of came was very open, and it was just a really good, strong discussion.
Yes.
We do know those section 102 reports do make a difference. Yeah. Any other questions on just these I'll ask? That takes us to any other public business that anyone wishes to raise. Public, so on that basis, we will close this public session. And those who've been watching, thank you for joining in.